Hi, this is Paul Mascetta, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about body language. Few other groups of gestures can compare to the power of hand gestures. According to scientists, there are more nerve connections to the brain on the hands than any other part of the body. The hands are so essential to human survival that the body even went as far as to make sure that there would always be adequate communication between the brain and the hands. Now, I want to talk to you about the significance of these body language signals that are expressed through the hands. How much can you learn from observing just a person's hands? Plenty, if you ask me. For example, did you know that you could easily see a person's bias by watching how he moves his hands up and down during the course of a conversation? That's right, all you need to do is watch how a guy or a girl discusses ideas. The bias is revealed in the gesticulation. It's estimated that 90% of the world's population is right-handed. So if a person is right-handed, his stronger side is his right side. A right-handed person who has a personal preference for something will describe that something and emphasize its points by moving his right hand during the discussion, much like I am right now. Now, when a right-handed person wants to shed light on opposing views or not so desirable options, he will use the opposite hand, which is essentially a weaker hand. Inversely, a left-handed person will use his left hand to describe something he likes, and then he'll shift to the right hand if he has to talk about something that he does not like. So it's pretty simple, but this little secret is brutally effective in determining if the other person is being sincere when he says that he fully agrees with what you're saying or what you're offering. For example, if the other person says that he likes your project ideas, but he enumerates the benefits of your ideas with his left hand and he's a right-handed person, you can be sure that there's really some degree of resistance and the other person is simply pretending to agree with what you're saying. Now let's talk a little bit about hand rubbing. Remember when we were little children and we would rub our palms in excitement when we heard that we're about to get something that we really enjoy, like ice cream or candy or a brand new toy? Well, believe it or not, this gesture usually doesn't go away when we transform into adulthood. The frequency of usage is reduced, of course, but adults are just as prone to excitement as kids, or even more so in some cases. Now, some of you might be wondering, how can this information be useful to me? That's pretty obvious. I know that already. But let me give you some examples. Let's say you walked into a swanky, new, trendy restaurant in a big city. It's the hottest place in town. And the waiter who's assigned to your table is very attentive and he seems very pleased to serve your table. Then at one point he rubs his palms together as he asks you if you want anything else. There it is. There's a positive expectation. And in the context that I gave you, the waiter is probably expecting a nice tip from you. Now, let's say you're a speaker at a big conference in a big city in front of a lot of people, and the host of the conference stands up and starts rubbing his hands as he introduces you to the crowd. The hand rubbing is there only for a few seconds, but you were inquisitive enough and observant enough to catch it. What exactly does it mean? Well, obviously the host of the conference is excited to have you on board as a speaker. Second, the host is probably communicating to you that everyone is expecting a dynamite performance from you and that you shouldn't disappoint them with something plain, boring, and just not interesting. Now, the speed at which a person rubs his hands is also a big indicator of intent. Here's a good example. Let's say you were looking for a brand new car. You walk into the dealership and the salesman, who appears to be very knowledgeable, guides you through the whole showroom and presents the most popular cars to you. So you're taking a look around, he's showing you the cars. If you ask the car salesman about the best car for your budget, watch out if he rubs his hands. Pay attention. If he rubs his hands quickly, then you're in the clear, because a quick hand rub means the other person has positive intentions and that the benefit of the action is going to be just for you. But If the other person is slowly rubbing his hands as he presents something to you, you can be sure that he's looking out for his own benefit as well. Now let's talk about clenching the hands together, like this. Much like the palm rub, clenching both hands during a conversation also has its own set of signification. Generally, a person who's clenching his hands, even if the rest of his gestures or expressions is extremely confident, is usually experiencing some form of anxiety or fear. This gesture can also be used and viewed as a barrier gesture if the other person is trying to hold in some of his thoughts and emotions as he's talking with another person or a group of people. This gesture can also be analyzed as a way to disagree with another person's ideas. The clenched hand gesture does not produce any positive connotations whatsoever. When a person does this, it's always negative. It's not good. So if you're talking to an important person, do not clench your hands because it's very defensive, and quite frankly, it doesn't really add anything good to your own effort to project a credible and confident person. Now, what other things does the clenched hand reveal about people? Well, here are some quick tidbits of information that I think will help you. First, the clenched hand gesture shows frustration, particularly when a person is forced to deal with a very negative negotiation. People that are together and looking to negotiate something can produce white knuckles after having been clenched for too far long. Restraint does not come with a price because during negotiations, the last thing that you want to show is that you're about to fly off the handle. You want to project an image that you're cool, calm, and collected. The gesture also reveals that the person himself is thinking that he's not credible enough or convincing enough during the conversation, so he's having self-doubt. Now take note that by conversation, I refer to any face-to-face social interaction that requires literal proximity, not video conferences, not Skype, not FaceTime. Face-to-face conversations can have a bigger impact on a person, and his deeply rooted anxieties can emerge when he feels that he's not on the winning side anymore. The clenched hand gesture can be done in 3 different ways. The person can hold his hand near his face, that's the first one, or he can place his clenched hands flat on the table, that's number 2. But then there's the last option, which is to place the clenched hands near the zipper area, that's method number 3. Regardless of the positioning of the clenched hands, the signification of the gesture always remains the same. Now, how would you like to learn a quick way to project power? Well, you can do this through something called the steeple gesture, which kind of looks like a spider doing push-ups on a mirror. If the hands clenched gesture shows the other person that you're anxious about something, the steeple gesture shows the complete opposite. What it shows is that you're a very confident person and you're very confident about what you're saying and what you're doing. And because of this, you're a force to be reckoned with. It's been observed that the steeple gesture is used most frequently by thinkers like master chess players and natural power players like administrators, politicians, managers, and powerful business folks. This gesture is usually performed when a person has to give directions or orders to someone else. The steeple signifies not only self-confidence but superiority over others. Now the question is, should you use it? And when should you use it? Well, you can use it if you're in the presence of people who are formally below you in terms of hierarchy, in terms of them being your subordinates. For example, if you are a boss, a manager, or an office administrator and you're holding a meeting, you can use this gesture sparingly to remind people that you are indeed a boss and your ideas and recommendations should always be considered, respected, and listened to very carefully. If, on the other hand, you want to convince someone, you don't use this gesture because you'll come across as arrogant in some instances. So if you have to persuade someone and you have to influence them and you're on the same level with them, the best way to go about it is to create an equalizing atmosphere so that the other person will respect you and at the same time will consider you an equal. This will enable you to create rapport. The steeple is a key gesture during negotiations or presentations because people usually perform this gesture at the end of a negotiation. However, it really is just the main hook of a cluster of gestures that you want to follow. And here's what I mean by that. People never stick to a single gesture because they need to express themselves completely. So here's the technique when the other person starts using the steeple gesture. You want to check the other gestures in the cluster. If the other gestures are positive, then the only thing left to do is to formally ask the other person for permission to carry out the idea, get the product, sign the deal. Positive body language after the steeple gesture means the other person was indeed persuaded and you closed the deal. But negative body language after the steeple gesture means the other person is not interested in what you've said and he really does not want to say yes at this point. So it's time to redefine, reposition yourself and start over again. So if you're offering an idea to your boss and he begins to steeple and he starts to cross his arms, then you can be sure that he's really not impressed with what you have said so far. So, respond to the body language accordingly, and you will most likely get the results that you want.